You are listening to Ras Temari Radio, Offense Necessary, where we discuss everything but politics. We are very, very lucky to have with us today a good friend, Haben, from Addis Ababa. Hi, Haben.
Hi, Zodi. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So we've launched about 10 days now. This is, I believe, our 8th episode. And we're going to get to talk about Habens' experience, having spent quite a bit of time in the United States, sort of her approach to her career and to what she's been doing in Ethiopia since she's been back, and to women in entrepreneurial roles in Ethiopia in the contemporary situation. So obviously, just to go back and talk about the idea of the station itself, right? Ras Temari, we're referring to obviously self-education, and the way in which most education really and educational research shows us consistently is the result of self-interest and people pursuing interest. So ideally what a teacher does is really teach a man to fish rather than give a man to fish, right? And sort of encourage interest, sort of pursuing outside. So hopefully people here listening can be part of a platform of like sharing their interests and trying to sort of inculcate their passions in others. But we're also talking about the relationship between foreign and domestic. So you spent quite a bit of time, what was it, 20 years in Portland?
21 years
21
in Portland,
years
yeah.
Portland. So what brought you there, and what did you get of your experience in the States?
Okay. So I moved into America in 1998, and I was a junior in high school, and I lived there for 21 years. I moved there to Portland because we had a relative there, and it just happened. I happened to go there and live with him while I was in high school. And then I went to college, and then I started working there, and so Oregon just became my second home, essentially. I don't think I ventured out too much, and I just lived in Oregon partly because I felt I found my community there. Mm-hmm. And so I lived there, went to school, worked, and built my career for 21 years.
Great, and your background, you did GSP, right? And graduate school of business. I mean,
I did. Yeah.
And your undergraduate is in.
I did general science and accounting.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always so I did general science. I was a pre-med and thinking I was gonna go to medical school,
mm-hmm.
Like a lot of us.
Like so many of us, right?
So many of us, but I decided that's not the route I wanted to take.
Uh-huh.
But then I always had a love for numbers and a fascination with math. So once I was done with school, I started working at a company in the accounting department, and then I was like, okay, I need to go get my degree in accounting, and so I went and got my post back and worked in accounting and finance for years.
All of this is in Portland.
In Portland.
In one city.
Actually, no. I went to University of Oregon, which is in Eugene.
Right.
It's also called Nike University. So I went there, and then I moved back to Portland. So the rest of my life has been, predominantly, most of my stay has been in Portland. I've lived in Portland. And Portland, I know, Zodi, you've never been to Portland, but...
No, I was nearby, right, in the Bay Area. Met a lot of people, especially from Eugene, would come down to Northern California, but yeah.
So in Portland, the way Portland is it's a city, it's a small city, but it's such an intertwined community. Like, it's almost like all the black people know each other. If you went to high school, you either know that person or you know their cousin. It's a very tight-knit community. And I think coming from Ethiopia, where we are, living here, you're a tight-knit, your neighbors, like, it's a very...
There's a decent-sized Ethiopian community in Portland,
there
too,
is.
right? Yeah, so
actually, there wasn't when I got there, but now it's, like, huge.
Right,
So that part of it, I think Portland just makes you stay there because of the community and the people there. I mean, the rain was horrible and I hated it. But the people is like what makes you stay. And I'm realizing that more now that I moved here. People ask me, do you miss America? I'm like, no, I don't miss America. Yeah. But do I miss my people? Yeah, I definitely do miss my people. Like the energy, like the intellectual conversations, the growth, all that I miss. Definitely.
Yeah, it sounds like my experience, and a lot of people who come back here, it's like, you don't really miss America because... America, you know what I mean? Like, you, there's opportunities there, of course, but it's such a giant place with so many different kinds of people.
Yeah.
But if you find your community, you find your niche in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the West Coast experience in general is a different thing, you know. Starting from the Bay Area all the way up to, I mean, Seattle's another place with a lot of the same characteristics as Portland.
Yeah, very. Pacific Northwest is like a place of its own character and definition. Like, I don't feel like there's any place like it.
Yeah. I mean, Seattle gave us, right before you came in there, it's a very explosive kind of culturally, for those who don't know.
Yeah.
And it didn't make it over here, I don't think, in large numbers, but the whole grunge movement and the clothing and the sort of a celebration of the griminess and the rain and the, you know what I mean? And but a lot of, like, economic despair in a lot of those areas around Washington. And
for sure.
But also kind of like, what's the word for it? Like these little... enclaves of people who are interested in the arts.
Like hipster culture.
Yeah, hipster culture, right.
Portland's big hipster culture, definitely. I mean, I'm so happy and thankful. Like, I had my experience be there, like, because I think in a lot of big major U.S. cities, you kind of get lost in the city, like the community-minded background that you had here. You don't find it there, but Portland, in a lot of ways, I'm realizing the benefits and the beauty of Portland now that I'm far removed from it.
Right.
I'm seeing that my experience was unique and not what other people have experienced. And so for that, I'm grateful. But I'm also happy that I live in this beautiful, sunny weather.
I don't think people in Addis Ababa quite appreciate, because people complain. We were just talking when we walked in the room, you know, oh my God, it's too sunny. Oh my God, it's too so it gets a little bit too cold in it. And yes, sometimes there's a nice breeze that comes in. But it's, I mean, for a lot of people who are in the States or in Europe for a long time, it's comical. I mean, the one thing you cannot legitimately complain about in Addis Ababa or in this region is the weather. We're spoiled with it, really.
Although I don't like the rainy season here either.
Me neither.
But,
It's reminiscent of Portland, I would imagine. It's a day in and day out. It's unusual for people in the States as well. There's no such thing as a rainy season. Rain is spread out. Rain
you know what I love about the sunny weather too is I always tell my employees this. It's like, it's so easy to be motivated when the weather is so beautiful. Like, I'm like so excited to wake up and seize the day and go do things. When I was in Portland, unless I had work or school, everything else was optional. Like, almost all the time I would cancel plans because I was just like, it's so crappy out there. I'm not motivated to even get dressed and leave my house.
Well, it works out for us because our off time for school is the rainy season. Whereas in the States, the off time for school is when it's sunny outside. I guess some people feel that, you know, when it's sunny outside, when it's beautiful out. I mean, I had this in college because I was in Northern California. It's beautiful every day. And it's gorgeous lawns and, you know, ultimate frisbee, and it's like, people get like, oh, I just want to go outside and have a good time. I don't want to be sitting here, you know, reading some school text. So the distraction.
I completely agree. When I was doing my master's, I was doing an MBA for professionals, so I was working full time, and we went through we even had school during the summer, and it was like the most brutal thing in the world because you have 10 months of rain and the little summer and sunshine we have to be stuck
You have to be
school.
Working, it's tough.
And it's like we would always be looking out the window, and our professors would be like, "What's going on today?" And we're like, "It's beautiful outside, and we're stuck here till 10 p.m."
Right. I would say the one place that I've been to, any place that I've visited that has the most Addis Ababa style weather is actually the Bay Area. Which, for people who don't know, is just a little south, basically, of Oregon.
You think, like, the Bay? I would say Los Angeles has more Addis Ababa.
Los Angeles is more tropical than Addis Ababa, I feel like. Los Angeles is warmer. It's like Southern California is what people think of California. It's just warm all the time, and people walk around in shorts. Northern California is more like Addis Ababa, where it does get cold in the evening, and you do get, you know, bouts of rain and griminess, but kind of scattered. And actually, San Francisco and the East Bay and the northern part of the Bay, it's very different from San Jose, which has the larger, I think, concentration of Ethiopians. Is mostly when it gets to San Jose. But regardless, I mean, so your experience in Portland, you went there. You were both there for education. I mean, it sounds like it started very early in your education. At what point did you decide, because you were interested in numbers and so on, you said, and you started off as a medical student. At what point did you decide that you really wanted to do entrepreneurship? Was it when you started practicing or working in a company, you said? Or like, what made you realize that was sort of your path?
So when I was in my early 20s, I think I really wanted to either run a foundation or work in a nonprofit and things like that. But eventually, like, as I got deeper into my career, I realized in order to help people, you have to have a good, strong foundation and career. So the way I looked at like foundations and nonprofits really changed. And I volunteered in a lot of nonprofits and foundation, and I saw that like people get burnt out, and they get burnt out because they're not making the money that they want, and they just don't have the flexibility that they want. So for me, like, that put a switch in my head, and I realized, okay, maybe I need to focus more on my education and being in the business side of things, but I can still do good, and I can still help people, and I can still support nonprofits. So that switch happened when I was in my early 20s. And then I was thinking maybe I want to go to grad school and all these things, but it never felt like the right time to do it. And then eventually I ended up doing my MBA. So that also sparked the businesswoman in me, because I felt like maybe my mind expanded a little, and I realized that I don't want to necessarily work a 9-to-5 for someone, and I want to explore business and do something else. At the base of it, I think I'm a person that wants to help people, and I realized I kind of think about helping people in a different way, because I felt like by doing business, by supporting businesses, I wanted to get into consulting, which I just started recently, right? Where I'm helping businesses scale up and grow and hire more people. That's the kind of nonprofit and foundation kind of work I want to do, versus your traditional, you work at a nonprofit 9-to-5, you work there for 20 years, and you're burnt out, and you kind of lose your steam, and you don't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because I think people have this mentality, or had it. I think it's changing, of like, you either go into the nonprofit sector, the development sector, often public sector, funded, government sector, and because you want to do good, or you go into that cutthroat capitalist business sector because you want to make money, and more that's like a false dichotomy. It's a false
that's a false narrative, and I do think, like, I've had several bosses that have business women and strong women that showed me that business, you could put the humanity into business. Like, business doesn't have to be cutthroat. It doesn't have to be business. In order to be successful, you don't have to walk all over people, exploit people, and do bad things to be successful. You can still do business in a way that's very honest and filled with integrity.
Right, and humane. And it's funny because the tech world, which I was around from living in San Francisco and started realizing this with Google and with the not just humane, but like that people should be happy at work, and Google had this like revolutionary idea that they make you pursue your own project and do something that you're what is it, like 20% of your, and other tech companies started realizing like people should be relaxed, people should have fun at work, which is sort of what one of the points that we make by talking about self-education and what people are realizing about the education sector more, which is, again, people, when they're having a good time, when they're informed, when they don't feel like they're learning or they're being forced to learn for a test or for this, when you take the stress out of it and they're able to pursue their own project, you can create an environment as a teacher where real learning happens, you know, on a forum like this or in a classroom.
I think independent thinking is what makes people like want to, you want to give people the platform to like think independently, to pursue things their own way. And we're seeing more and more of that here in Ethiopia, where I think we had, like, when I was growing up, like, education was like you either did sciences, like you're an engineer, or you're like, there were very specific categories.
And very top down.
Yeah. And as a society and as a generation, we started seeing that kind of mentality is not growing us as a nation. Like, independent thinking is very important for us, to have different perspectives and to get out of that mentality of doing things this way and that's the only way. Like, I mean, I do think that's the difference between a lot of Western places.
Absolutely.
And here is, it does give you the license to think independently. Getting your master's, like undergrad versus master's, like, what's the two differences for me, if you ask me, is during my grad school days, I was much more of a problem solver, independent thinker. I knew the purpose of why I was getting my education.
Right.
It wasn't because that's what people do. Like, you finish high school and then you go to get your degree. I was doing it because I really was passionate about the subject matter that I was taking, and it made me think differently. You know, I do think grad school helped me become much more like independent thinker and a problem solver at that. So yeah, I agree with you completely.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we could call it Western, but I even think, because I spent some time in Europe, in educational systems there, and in the U.S. And yeah, they have some of it in Europe compared to, say, Ethiopia, China, much more traditional, rigorous kind of education. But Americans, like when European teachers deal with Americans, like not as knowledgeable or as you might think. Don't score as well on tests as you might think. America like ranks like 15th or 17th in math, which is like, how could America? But it's because American education in some ways is a reflection of, like, American advertising, Burger King, have it your way.
Yeah.
What do you want? My McDonald's. It's all about you.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be, the people call this the coddling of the American mind, right?
Yeah,
It's,
I agree.
Like American are like children who are very narcissistic and get whatever they want. Get the wine of their parents and so on. Very protected. But at the same time, the advantage of it, and what we're sort of adapting, because again, one of the themes of the show is the relationship between the foreign exposure and Ethiopia in this current moment. One of the things that creates is that independent thinking, critical thinking, being creative in every aspect, like not just in the creative arts, but like in being creative in writing history papers, being creative, kind of thinking for yourself. So it is gradually seeping into. But we've had, previously we had Farial came on and did architecture student. Was talking about how it's still very structured, very rigorous, and there isn't as much spaces. But I think the younger generation is pushing up against that.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, I even see it in my employees, right? Like, where it's like they wait for me to make every decision. They only want to make easy decisions. And part of that is our educational system, right? It doesn't... you've kind of grown up in going through this educational system where you're told there's a limit to how far you can take your brain.
Right.
But it's the whole. I always tell them, like, I have the same brain you guys have. I just expand it one step further, and I say fail. If you have to make a choice, it doesn't have to be right or wrong. I just want you guys to make decisions.
Right.
And then if the decision is wrong, we'll fix it. We'll figure out ways.
Or you'll learn from it for the next time. It's a learning process. Right?
And also, like, decision making is like a lesson in exercise. The more decisions you make, the better decision maker you're going to be. Right. But if you never make decisions and you only want to make the good decisions and you're waiting for that moment, you're not going to be a decisive person. And
you're taking choices away from yourself. Right?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that consumers complain about going into stores in Ethiopia, and again, I think we're getting better and better when it comes to this.
Yeah.
But this is a reflection of our mentality when it comes to education as well, is the whole, like, I challenge mentality.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, you go in and the person who's supposed to, the clerk or the person who's supposed to help in a customer, you'll throw them a curveball, which they're supposed to be used to, right? You'll ask them a question that's outside of what they're trained to do. They're like, whoa, wait a second, that's not what I'm trained to do.
Yeah.
I chat them, as opposed to, how about I try and help you solve this problem, which is a new kind of thinking. But
you think I challenge is a bad word. The word I hate, and all my employees know this, and they don't ever dare repeat it to me, is gun. It's we'll have this whole conversation, and then you negate everything we've discussed with just the word gun. Don't ever say gun. Because we've, like, worked out all the kinks and stuff. Gun? And I'm like, if I hear this word again, I'm going to lose my itch.
Yeah, there's no other, right. No reservations.
Yeah.
And I also, sometimes the use of ishi. It's like ishi in a dismissive way. Like, when you bring something to be like, hey, this needs to be, and they'll be like ishi, but like they're not really. It's like just to make you go away kind of thing. Not to actually. So that ishi can also be a bit of a
dismissive,
a bit of dismissive and a bit of an unwillingness.
But my pet peeve word of, like, the word I hate to death is gun. I don't hate a lot of things. I don't like a lot of things. I try not to hate things. Gun is like the frustration of my 2 years of working here.
Yeah.
But that might make me move back just from hearing that word. It's like, you've done all this work. We've worked out all the kinks and the issues and the problems, right? And you negate it with that one word.
Right. Yeah.
But I also, I mean, with me, it's like I also try to understand. I want to meet people where they're at, right? Like people haven't had the same exposure as I have. I'm lucky and blessed to have grown up in a family dynamics where I was outspoken. I was allowed to think independently.
Were you the eldest in your family?
I'm the oldest.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in Ethiopian families, we still have that the eldest kind of reigns supreme, and the youngest kind of
No, I'm definitely the oldest. People are like, I'm pretty sure you're the oldest kid in the house. Like you can tell. You can tell. Yeah. But yeah, like I think I was one thing I know about my parents is, especially me and my sister, they pushed us really hard to be the best versions of ourselves. I think my mom wanted us to have a different lifestyle than her. And then my dad just wanted us to be more outspoken. He didn't want us to have the same experiences previous generations have had. So a lot of people think I am the way I am because I lived in the States for a long time.
It's because you were here.
But even before that, I was really like, I was very... this opinion and this person who I am was already formed by the time I went. Yeah. I mean, 17 is not like super young. You were raised here. I was raised here, so I knew what I wanted. My mom was very honest and outspoken, and when I was a kid, it used to embarrass me. But then as I got older and I started becoming her, I say sometimes, I think I really learned the true value of being who I am and not apologizing for it. Right. And I think that's also another thing. Like people care too much what other people think.
Sure. And we have that. We've talked about this on the station. The ilunta.
Ilunta. And then also, I by the way, I grew up here till I was 17, so I do have ilunta. Right. But I put it in compartments. Like at work, personal. I don't personalize business. Business is business to me. Work is work. It doesn't matter if I love you, you're my best friend, whatever. When we're working, we're working. Like boundaries. Like there needs to be boundaries.
We do a lot of socializing in the workplace. Here, a lot of socializing to the point that it replaces actually getting stuff done.
It's like not only socializing, but everything is like every decision I make, like people will question it from a personal perspective. It's like if I switch an employee of mine to go to another store and work there, it's because I don't like that person or whatever.
So people refer to this as office politics, right? Office politics.
Not because I think you would be better suited for that position. Sure. Or if I switch you around and I'm trying to strategize differently in business, it's like personal. It's like you're trying to hurt me. If we raise prices, it's like we're trying to hurt. Like, people make it personal here.
Yeah, we do have that tendency among us. I was going to ask you another question. One of the things that people from abroad, and again, I kind of went back and forth, right? Yeah. So I'm not entirely a foreigner to this country, not at all. But and people with a sort of more modern mindset, modern exposure here, complain about, other than the whole Aichalem or the gun or the people making it difficult for customers, right? Yeah. Difficult for you to bring money to a customer based organization, which is nonsensical, right? You live off of people.
Yeah.
One of the other things that people often point out is that somehow a lot of small businesses here are entirely dependent on the owner. You know what I mean? Like if the owner's not there, you can tell. Yeah. Like this restaurant or this or this that, the owner's not there. And we are getting better when it comes to this. But 10, 15 years ago, I remember it was like you could tell the owner's not here because nothing's working.
Yeah, nothing's working.
The owner's not here? Okay. Yeah. Is that that we didn't have this culture of management? Or what exactly is the problem there, you think?
It's funny you mention this. I work at Gasaramena, and I a lot of people tell me you work as if you own this place, and I think that culture is not here.
Right.
Like people will put their 8 to 5 and they're gone. Like they don't want to think about anything, whatever. But at first it used to frustrate me, but now I'm starting to realize also there isn't a lot of incentive for people to work as if they're the owner. Like they don't see their life changing or moving. Like in the States, for example, you work for 1 year, you bust your butt, you get a promotion, you'll get a raise, and with that raise you might buy a new fancy car. You'll really in tangible ways see the efforts of your hard work. You know what I mean? Like last year, for example, if you worked all year and then you get that promotion you wanted and you have the money in the bank and maybe you're going to upgrade your car. So all your friends are going to be like, oh, that hard work sure.
The status.
It paid off or whatever.
Especially when it comes to wages, right? Wages or other compensation for your labor. Bonuses.
Yeah.
So So this is an interesting thing that you touched upon, because I suspected that that's a big part of it, right?
Yeah, it is a big
because people here, one of the things that feeds these dangerous culturalist notions and these dangerous, like, oh, we're just not smart enough, we're not as productive, we're lazy, which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
It's like we justify it.
Yeah.
Like, but really what it often comes down to, I mean, this in business schools, they teach you this.
Yeah.
You incentivize people by paying them.
Yeah.
Right, for their labor. That's why people come to work, is to get paid.
Yeah. If
you're paid what Ethiopian workers are paid, it's not surprising that they're not as productive or as motivated, especially since not only they paid that, but there's very little opportunity for growth or opportunity to make it to the next stage. And I actually think, because I've worked on this, and I want to know what you think about this aspect too, that there's even deeper issues to the effects of low wages, of insufficient wages. I'm not an economist, so I can't say why our wages are as low as they are. I don't think it has to do with productivity, not purely. Some people say it's about negotiation at the workplace. There might be some of that. Our unions are very strong, but unions aren't strong in America anymore either, right? So there's something else, because our wages are so low. The impact of that is, one, you have brain drain. Right, you have people going abroad, because not only could they suddenly support themselves, but you can put away 20% of your good salary in America and suddenly support your family back in Ethiopia. Right, you have the devalorization of education and of traditional work on the basis, because why would you? You're not getting paid. You're not getting incentivized. You have internal brain drain, because a lot of the same people who have access to the education that gets you those jobs also have land or property, and they can just as easily, because rents and remittances are so high. It's a rents and remittance society that people can rent out a room in their house for the same amount of money that they make. So why would you be motivated to go to that? And now you have an internal brain drain as well. Then you have addictions of despair. You know what I mean? People just sitting around chewing chats all day long because they're not motivated, and they can still take care of themselves materially. And you have different kinds of dependencies and resentments that come from people making wildly different amounts, not based on work, but based on access to foreign capital and this and that. So I mean, I think, is it fair to say that, like you're saying, that it has a lot to do with wages and other forms of compensating labor, that this has broader problems for our society?
I totally agree with that. So, I was just thinking about this recently. You brought up a point that I was thinking about is, I remember when I was leaving my last job to move here, my boss was like, if it was about more money, I would throw more money at you. If it was about maybe changing positions, we could figure that out. But I know your heart is in, Africa, and you want to move back. I do think in the States, you categorize people that you manage into different categories, right? Some people are motivated by money. Some people are motivated by growth. Are they being challenged at work?
Right.
I think predominantly what I see with my workforce and in Ethiopia in general is people are motivated by money because it's so scarce.
Right.
I think being motivated by a growth and education and a challenging environment, in some ways, it's a luxury.
Right. Especially since we don't have that many challenging environments.
Yeah.
A lot of traditional workplaces here. If you're of a certain background, there isn't much to do. Right?
There's not much. But also, it's a luxury. Right out of college, right when you graduate out of college in the U.S., you're looking to make money. You're not looking to be in an environment where you're challenged or...
That comes later.
Yeah. And that's a luxury. That's where you built up your career enough that you can make those choices. You could be like, no, I don't want to work in an environment that's stuffy. I want to work in this environment. I want to work in an environment that's challenging. Straight out of college, a graduate from college, you're trying to make money.
Yeah.
You're trying to get a job that pays you well, that you can survive.
And for the first time in your life, no, the clothes on my back, I provided for this. It's a different thing when you've had your parents putting the clothes on your back and the roof over your head. Now suddenly, wait a second, I'm self-sufficient. It's completely different.
And so I feel here, people are still in that mentality because they're still in that, I just got out of college and I'm making money, but I'm not making enough money to live this luxury life. Sure. And, in the States, maybe you go to college and you get out of college, you have that job for 3 years, maybe 5 years tops. After that, you're making more money, you're rising up the ranks.
Now suddenly you have another concern, which is how do I make it through the really be challenged and happy and.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that some of that is luxury.
Yeah.
But part of that is, I mean, I know people in the States, especially in places like San Francisco, which is a lot of like artists and a lot of people who are like semi-homeless, who just cannot stand the 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
Like people I graduated with fancy degrees could not stand the 9 to 5, so they'd rather be a barista at a coffee shop or work in a bookstore, and you kind of romanticize it because when you're in that corporate cubicle, it's very much against a lot of people's human nature. Like a lot of people can't stand it, so you get like the tech. People who act like rock stars. You know, you even see when Apple would do their releases and Steve Jobs was out there acting like he was a rock star. And you get it because people fantasize about like living a non-corporate life because it is very stifling, right? Like, so it is partly a luxury, but partly, human beings don't just want to be able to make money. They want a little bit of freedom or a little bit of,
But I do think, if you look at it from the Ethiopian context, though, it is a luxury.
Yeah, to us it is,
I mean, if you think about it, in Ethiopia, even if I look at the demographic, how many percent, I mean, there might be people that don't like the 9 to 5, but it's the top 1%.
Right.
Like, I mean, you either were born into a family where there was a lot of money, or you had access to education and to a lot of resources, so you can make that choice.
Right.
Some people don't have those choices.
I mean, the vast majority of people here know what it's like to go hungry.
Yeah.
To actually walk around and deal with not knowing when you're going to get your next bread.
But for example, like even having parents that you don't have to support is a luxury in this country,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
Like I always sometimes tell my siblings that we're lucky, like we don't have to, like the only thing our parents expected of us is to make sure that we're successful and we had a healthy, happy life. And that's not a choice for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are like working hard so that they can support their families. Like that means their family is going to eat because they're working. So even that is a luxury.
It is, and it's funny because I think we have an obliviousness. Those who, I mean, there are massive class differences in this country. Massive class that are expressed in terms of education, in terms of language, in terms of the way people dress, in terms of their exposure to abroad. I mean, it's people who have our background. It's uncomfortable to talk about, and it's so obvious to people that people don't even address it. It's like the elephant in the room. But the massive differences between people of different classes, between those of us who have had certain opportunities, certain privileges, and the vast majority of the society who we share the same space with.
Yeah.
But we live kind of in different worlds. Even though we have these interactions, we have completely different experiences, and in a sense we're oblivious to their plight, right? Like they're aware of ours in a certain sense. But we're kind of oblivious to each other's experiences, even though we share the same society. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I think, when I was growing up, I feel like there was definitely a middle class, and I moved back now, and I feel like there isn't. There are the haves and the have-nots to me. But I don't agree with not understanding it. I think now more than ever, people understand each other's plights, right? Like, they really understand each other's plights. And I think more and more diaspora is moving here it's not because we can't make a lot of money in the States. We can. But the reason we're moving here and are motivated is because we want to see change, right? Like, we want to make sure that, like, during our tenure, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, we want to see the impact that we're making on employees, right? Like, for example, I'll give you a good example. At my office, sometimes I'm obsessive about details, and I'll push people. And I tell them, it's like, you're not going to work with me forever. Like, I want you to have the skills and the tools
to make it on your own.
To make it on your own.
But don't you think you're exceptional in that sense? I mean, I'm not trying to be but not too many bosses have that. Maybe now this is coming, but
I don't think so. I'll give you an example. My boss, Bobby, is one of my really good friends. He could have picked any friend to work for him, right? But he picked me because he wants that change in his company. This is
the owner of Ras Temari.
The owner.
Okay.
Like, he knows I care about the employees. I want to make an impact. I'm not motivated by greed or he knows I could have a good lifestyle there too. Right. But I think owners and company owners and business people are starting to realize that that's an important ingredient for their employees. Right. And that's why they're bringing people like that. If it was just about money for him, making more money, he wouldn't pick me. And I think, owners, a lot of business people realize that. I mean, again, I do think my boss is exceptional.
It sounds like he is.
He is a visionary, and he's not. It's not for him. It's about a legacy, and it's not about just making money. So I do know I'm fortunate to work for a company and an owner that believes that. But I have to think that there are a lot of other people that believe that.
And increasingly so.
Increasingly
yeah.
And Saudi, we hang out with a bunch of diasporas that just moved back,
right.
and it's very kind of scary how much in common we have.
Yeah.
Like all of us are pretty educated, had good careers in the U.S. and could have made good money and led a comfortable life there. But the choice we made to come here is because we want to be part of the change.
Right. And it's also, for one thing, there are opportunities here. People don't necessarily realize this. Our audience might not realize this. There's market saturation in the U.S. if you want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Every business idea you've done in the U.S. has probably been done 1,000 times before. Whereas this is the frontier. I realized this when an American guy I went to college with was a brilliant guy who had a million different opportunities thrown at him. American guy, Black American guy, came here. This was about 10 years ago, and he was like, dude, developing world, developing country. You want to be in a developing. This is the frontier. This is where a lot of stuff hasn't been done yet, and a lot of the opportunities. This is where property values are going up. This is where, you know what I mean. People don't necessarily realize, like, in a lot of ways, in certain areas, Ethiopia is really the land of opportunity that America used to be, or that a lot of these more saturated places. Yeah.
I mean, not even from the perspective you shared, but it is the land of opportunity. Where would you be in a position to manage people that really you could elevate them to the next level?
Yeah. For yourself and for others.
So, I mean, for me, like, you know, I've worked at Rainbow now 2.5 years, and I have, like, a deep attachment to the place. Like, just, I get emotional just thinking about it.
That's great.
Yeah, but part of it is because, obviously, my boss and how much he believes in me, and he, like, supports me 100% in what I'm doing. But it's also the employees, you know? Like, when you look at little changes that you've made in the culture and the way, even the work ethics and
growth,
and just the love the family that you've created, the family environment, then it makes you happy and it makes it worth it. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, what makes you, like, you know, that's what matters.
Right. Especially because, like, time is more scarce than money.
Yeah.
Time is, I mean, to spend your this is one of the reasons I think a lot of people came here. It's like, you know, to spend your life in that cubicle again, 40 to 50 hours a day, not doing what you love.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what are you making the money for? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like you spend way too much, especially in America, way too much time working for it to be, and really it's, you know, they say, find something you love to do, and that you can monetize, and you'll never have to work another day in your life. I mean, that's really the choice that we're all confronted with. The other thing is, from the employer's perspective, what you made me realize is one of the other issues with low wages is turnover. Right? So it's not just about compensating people financially, but your boss is Bobby, the owner. He wants you to be happy and empowered, and partly not only for yourself as a friend, but it helps us the money that you are set in place.
Yeah.
You know, most of the development success stories that we see in other countries, people had, and this is hard for our generation to wrap our minds around, people had like one job for life.
Yeah.
And they would get really, really good. I mean, human beings, it's amazing how good anybody can be at anything that they do over and over and over again. Right? So people had one job. Now, in a lot of these factories, a lot of these places where where wages are very low, you have such high turnover because people can't sustain themselves that you have to, as an employer, you have to train them again and again and again. And of course, you're going to struggle to really move forward, you know, as a company in that situation.
I think at our company we have a little, it's a little different. Like, most people have actually worked there for a long, long time. They have huge loyalty to the family. So in that sense, it's good.
Absolutely.
But in some ways also you think maybe it's good to have new fresh perspective, right? Like at the factory level, I think it's nice to have loyal employees that know the system over and over again. But on a managerial level, sometimes, like, people staying there for a long time can hurt companies, right? Where I just feel like you need a fresh start and fresh perspective, and you want people that change with the times, right? And I think, like, you know, you can, for example, right now we're in a war and business is slower and we have to work in a different way. Like we can't just continue, let's go keep doing.
You adapt to the situation.
You have to. Like you have
survive,
to, you have to make your brain think a little more and like look in different directions and say, okay, how do we survive this period, you know? You have to think that way. So on a managerial level, sometimes I do think like sometimes it's good if people like switch often. Not often, like every year you don't want to do that. Good. Maybe like every 5-6 years if people switched around, it's good. When people have been there and they like for a long time, especially I'm seeing this from a perspective of a new manager, right? Like a new in my position when I came, people were very resistant to the changes that I was going to bring because they have been there forever. And you know, you're a human. We're human beings. A lot of people don't want change. Like change is scary. And also, when things change around, you kind of figure out where do I fit into this new world.
So you're saying like when people stay at one job, even though it helps as far as them getting better and better at what they do, there's also a complacency there, or like people get stuck in their ways, and that can actually have the opposite effect.
I've seen that in America, like where people work in a company forever and you bring in a new computer system or ERP system and they're so resistant. You know,
there are people in the States, like you go to rural, people don't realize this here either. I mean, Portland and San Francisco, some of the places we are not always the typical American experience. There are people in rural areas in the States, they go in to volunteer for a political campaign. They don't know how to use a mouse. They don't know how to use a keyboard. Americans. Like in the 21st century.
So true. Like every time you change your computer system or your ERP or whatever, people are like people are so resistant to change because they feel like they're not going to be able to catch up, and so that fear that they have or like that like manifests itself in ugly ways, you know. So there's a lot of things that happen in the States that happen here too. I mean,
we have there are older people in the States who aren't technically adept and who aren't technically interested. And then there are a lot of people in the States who live countrified lives, and that's kind of what they like, and you know, they could be living in a different era, you know. So I think sometimes we forget that here too, is that modern Addis Ababans are much more cosmopolitan, much more technical, and much more sort of aware of what's going on in the world than a lot of people in the industrialized world, you know.
I think what a lot of modern day Addis Ababa people like lack is like maybe confidence and being outspoken and out there with their expert. Like, I mean, I think in America it's okay to fail. Like it's okay to try. You know, my last job that I had in the U.S., we had 2 slogans. One was "Fail harder," and then the second one was "Comfort is a slow death."
I like that.
It really,
take risks is what it was. Take a chance.
It really resonated with people, and to the point where sometimes the company was losing amazing employees because the motto was "Fail harder" and "Comfort is a slow death," and so people were like,
"Let me go somewhere else.
I'm gonna go pursue my passion," and things like that. But you know, I even think like out of any experiences I had, like my last job really made me fearless. Like, and it was because of what was ingrained in us, you know. And I try to do that here as much as possible when I teach people. Like, it's like, you know, you need to be, you know, when you send emails, it should be like this. You're not going to work here forever, are you? You might work somewhere else. I think I got a lot of that from my last company, too, because the company wasn't scared to lose people. Like, they pushed you to be your best version of you. And then at some point you realize, okay, comfort is a slow death. I'm getting too comfortable here.
Everything you're saying, to get back to a point we were making earlier, is like the antithesis of what people think cutthroat capitalism, right? Like the entrepreneur has to be willing to exploit their labor and just be greedy. I mean, of course that model is out there. It's out there, but like, but it's everything. Your approach to entrepreneurship is so much more humane and so much more reasonable and about empowering people.
I've been very fortunate, by the way. All the jobs I've had, people have been very empowering. Up to this day, I still keep in touch with a lot of people that I work with. In my last job, more than anything, I met some amazing, brilliant, humble, hardworking people, right? And there is capitalist corporate America. Like that's we can't deny it. Good. There's also gems like the company that I worked for that really like I do feel like they shaped me as a person. The way I look at a business and making money and your interaction with human beings. First of all, I realized at my last company, you don't have to be a mean person to get things done. You can be, I had a manager that I love to death to this day, and she's one of my role models, I think. And she was an amazing mom, amazing wife, amazing friend, amazing boss. And she handled her ish. She was the best at her job. And she made me realize, you can be the best at your job, and you can still be a good human being. You can still be well liked, and you can still have your boundaries, and you can have it all.
I think it's a good point to segue to what we wanted to talk about as well, which is you are someone who believes strongly in the power of positive thinking. There's a book called The Power of Positive Thinking, right?
There's a whole so. The Power of Now. Something like that.
Yeah, the presence and sort of and how positive thoughts attract. The law of attraction, right? Thoughts attract. Things, or I don't know how much you got into that aspect of it, but you talk about
we talked about it last time during on the phone conversation that we had. So I'm a big believer on the power of positive thinking. The power of not just the power of positive thinking, but it attracts good energy and good karma to me. I've had a couple life incidences that you could consider are really bad and horrible, and some people might not recover from, but I do think it changed so two things. I think a couple things changed my perspective. One is traveling a lot. When you travel, it makes you realize how small you are in this world. You forget that you're Haben or Saudi. You're just a speck into
and feeling insignificant is never a bad thing. It's never a bad thing. Right.
It's humbling. It's humbling, and it makes you realize, why am I taking myself seriously?
Right.
And then the power of positive thinking for me is I don't come from a perspective of why me.
Yeah.
I actually say when something bad happens to me, I don't say why me. But when something good happens to me, I'm just
how come?
I'm so thankful, and I'm just oh my God, thank you,
gratitude,
God, and I'm grateful. And I say, I'm so lucky to have this opportunity that someone else doesn't. And I do think, I'm not super religious, but I do think if we are all children of God, if a bad thing can happen to someone else, it can happen to me. And a good thing can happen to me, and it can happen to someone else from that perspective. But in 2014, I had a health issue, and partly sometimes my doctor says, you are so healthy because of your energy and how you approach life. I wasn't oh, why me? Why is this happening? I just kind of, just was okay, this is happening. And it changed my perspective, because I'm okay, I could be healthy today and standing and doing things, and tomorrow I could be bedridden, and I don't want to live my life that way.
Yeah, I had a similar thing happen when I was in high school. And American doctors are trained, and Ethiopian parents don't realize this, right? So everybody kind of freaked out and thought that I was severely ill, fatally ill. But American doctors are trained to cover themselves for liability, so they tell you the worst case scenario. So everybody freaked out. And then when it didn't turn out to be the worst case scenario, even though it was a very significant health issue, I was just very grateful. It's just the fact that but it's always that whole glass half full, glass half empty. There's nothing that will hurt you more than that victimhood. Or that sense of self-pity, because it's a sense of entitlement where you start to take everything that you do have for granted until you lose it. And then you suddenly appreciate what you don't know what you got until it's gone. And then everything that you don't have, it becomes an obsessive, and I think in American culture, especially in American politics, there is this race to playing the victim. This real desire to I want to be the victim. I want to be the victim, which is incredibly destructive and also very childish. American political discourse is very much.
One thing I'll say in Ethiopia, we don't see that much.
No, we don't.
Also because we're community minded. People are worried about their sister, their brother, or someone else. It's not a I society. You know what I mean? And I'm thankful, by the way. I always say sometimes the America I experience is so different than the America a lot of people experience, because I was in an area where there's community. I worked in an environment like I told you, my last company, everybody's so positive, everybody's uplifting, super brilliant, smart, some of the smartest people I've worked with, but more than anything, some of the most passionate and people filled with just a beautiful heart.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's also infectious. Like who you surround with and who you are around, like does impact like how you see yourself. If you're around people that always play victim, you're gonna tend to be like those people. But if you're around people that are positive,
right,
and
it's the company you keep. Yeah.
It's the company you keep, and you know we spend so much of our time at work, so much of our time out hanging out with different people. It has to impact us. Mm-hmm. So even here, I notice like that victim mentality. I don't see so much.
Not as much. Yeah.
It's a very like almost like. Even from my employees, what I see is like a collective struggle.
Right.
Not
a lot of
people
here are much more communal, which is one advantage we have. In America, everybody kind of lives in their own, again, that coddling thing, like lives in their own kind of American dream, you know, their own yard, and doesn't really get along and talk to their neighbors, in general, in America. Yeah. And that is something that I hope we don't lose. I hope we don't lose as we move more towards capitalism. These like social fabric building, you know, and all of these mahabas, and you know, like neighborhood associate, all these aspects.
That's like sometimes as a boss, I'm just like, okay, like this is too distant. Like, you know, I think there's a thin line between maintaining our community and our culture and our heritage, but there's also like work is work to me. Like, you know, it's like I lost my mom 3 days later. I went to work. Like that I'm that person. So for me, I do think this it has to be a balance, right? This. Lexo and stuff, like I do think those kinds of like too much of that work can impact our economy. You have to think on a big scale,
And sometimes it's good to be selfish a little bit. You know, it's a little bit. You know, because it's only once you empower yourself that you start, to empower.
So it's a you know, like for example, like there's all these like saint days and things don't get done. Like out of the 30 days, if there's 20 days that you have, like you can't function like that either. That's not how economies grow or scale up. So it's like you have to pick and choose, right? So sometimes I do have that struggle with my employees, and sometimes they might think I'm heartless, but there has to be a balance.
And that's not a uniquely Ethiopian problem either.
Yeah.
Like I think we think of Ethiopia. It's not even a uniquely developing world. But I noticed this in France. You know, France is a very rare country in the industrial world in that they often have mass unemployment that doesn't exist in much of West. Yeah. And you know, when Sarkozy was when I was in France for a few months, and when Sarkozy came to power, his whole thing was, I want us to work more to make more. Yeah. Work more, make more. Because everybody complained about the fact that, first of all, they had 35-hour work week and, you know, very short work. And they were more into school rather than they were into work, which is the opposite of the American way, right? Where nobody does anything in school and everybody suddenly starts, becoming obsessive workaholics in work. But, you know, like all these days off that they would have, you know, and we have that here too because we have, you know, Muslim holidays, Christian holidays, our national holidays, foreign holidays, and you're right, it kind of saps our desire to get stuff done.
Yeah, and it has to be a balance, right? Sometimes I'm like, you know, as a working professional, like I don't have the same luxury as someone that is like running a business, like, you know, has a small business or like flexibility. So you have to pick and choose your battles, right? Like I also think you have to set your life in a way that makes sense to you. And sometimes people don't have those choices, but I'm getting the hang of it. I think I also have been partly very removed from that kind of life, and I'm a person who's worked 20 years nonstop, and I actually don't know what to do with myself half of the time when I don't have work. So I can't expect the same thing.
That sounds like an American problem. Like you really incorporated that that like what my job, I miss my job kind of thing that Americans said to have.
Although I was with a friend the other day, and the guy's like, you're like more than like your work style is more like a British person than an American. I was like, what are you talking? You're kind of rigid, and I was like. And I'm not rigid, but I am I'm very conscious about time. Like I like to use my time efficiently. And I'm punctual. Like I have anxiety when I'm late to things. Oh. So from that perspective, if that's defined as a British quality, I guess I do have some British.
I didn't know I was British too, because I get that all the time here. Yeah. It's like, people are so British. Why do everybody accepts being late all the time? Yeah. Coming to if I'm 5-10 minutes late, I'm so apologetic to that person. And people here, it's like, it's no big deal. Kind of.
Yeah. But I don't know if
I don't know how stuff gets done
I don't
here.
know if that's necessarily an American thing.
I
We
don't
have
know.
a common American friend that's always late.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's necessarily an
Yeah.
American thing. My dad has always been a punctual person, and I
Yeah.
think that's where I got it from.
Yeah.
I also don't like this whole thing when I have certain people that I meet with, and they're like, "I'm pretty punctual for a Habesha person."
Ah, no, yeah. But see,
You're
that's
either
that
punctual or you're
those
not.
dangerous culturalist notions.
Yeah.
We were talking about wages and how, like, sometimes
Yeah.
it's just basic
Or
incentives,
even
right?
like at the weddings,
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, the bride and groom are gonna be late, so we're gonna be." No, that's you're perpetuating the
Yeah,
cycle.
exactly. You're accepting it,
Yeah.
and this is like a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, this is the way it is here. And I think people do that for survival here, because you can't complain all the time. A lot of us would come from abroad, we get frustrated that things aren't working, and then as a survival technique, you have to accept it. But then in accepting it, are you not perpetuating it, right? As opposed to so it's like a tough. It's a tough thing.
I think if there was a couple weddings where the bride and groom just showed up and just went into the hall without the people being there, people would learn their lesson. In order to break a cycle, something has to change. If you keep doing the same thing over and over, you're never going to change it.
I have this one thing I learned about weddings, and I think if I ever do get married, I'm not sure that I will. But this is one thing I would love to incorporate is the Quaker ceremony. But you know the Quakers? This little sort of pacifist, somewhat anarchistic little Christian community. They're literally called the Society of Friends.
Yeah.
And when I heard about their wedding ceremony, I was like, any other wedding ceremony after this is silly. Compared to what they you know what they do?
Mm-hmm.
And again, this works for punctuality and all that. What you were talking about the bride and groom. Everybody gathers.
Yeah.
The bride and groom stand in front of it. There's no vows. There's no dearly beloved. There's no this or that. Everybody just stands there and says nothing in silence. Now, if somebody's moved to say something, they can. Right? It's that whole speak your piece thing.
Yeah.
If somebody's moved to say something, they can.
Yeah.
But no pre-prepared speeches. No embroidery. No. And then at some point, the priest looks around. Okay, we're good. You are now man and wife. And when I heard about that and someone confirmed me that's what they do, I was like, dude, all that speechifying and the vows and the this and the that and the candle board and the flower girl, it all seems silly to me now when I think of that.
So
the way
they don't do a reception or anything?
I mean, they do. They can, but like the basis of their ceremony is everybody just gathers around and enjoys being together, and there's nothing you could really say about what is about to happen. That you know what I mean. Sometimes words kind of fail you, so you just kind of stand there silently.
Actually, it's beautiful.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Actually, I'm with you on the same page when it comes to weddings. Like, I'm more I think I do want to get married, but more than the wedding, the marriage excites me. The wedding for me is just like spending money, feeding all your friends that probably make enough money to feed themselves. Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
It becomes a status thing.
Yeah, and I've never really imagined like myself having a wedding and stuff. Like, that's never been one of my dreams, you know? The only thing I worry about is, like, I do want to get married because I don't want to die alone. That's the one thing I've never compromised on. But besides that, like, even, like, a big ring and stuff, like, I almost feel like it's not fair for a girl to get this huge diamond ring.
Yeah,
and then the guy doesn't get anything. I would rather travel with that money and then just get a small whatever.
Right.
Like,
people spend down payment money on that stuff in the States. I mean, it's like it's a
actually,
real
States,
significant.
there's a rule, like, it's supposed to be 3 months' salary. You know that, right?
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Yeah.
That.
So if you make, I don't know, 2,000, you should spend 6,000. And if you make whatever.
That's not unreasonable, but that's also 3 months' salary. That's also what the government taxes you.
Yeah.
On a yearly basis, 3 months out of the year in the U.S. you're paying federal taxes.
That's why they based it that way.
Yeah. So if the government's going to take that much from you, your wife and her family should take that much. But that brings us to one subject, and I think we can conclude pretty soon. It is warm in here, and you've been very generous with your time, so we really appreciate it. But like. One thing I wanted to get to, and I know this is a personal conversation, so you reveal, but you said you're still interested in getting married and so on. Women and entrepreneurship and I don't know how you feel about feminism and those kinds of issues, but I know more and more young women who have this countercultural mentality, self-consciously countercultural mentality. I'm not going to let this patriarchal, traditional Ethiopian society tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to have kids. If I want to, I can.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I mean. I don't have to fit a template. I can live single and not go straight from my parents' house to, as was expected, going to my husband's house. Go from being somebody's daughter to being somebody's mother / wife. So how do you navigate that? I mean, do you feel that kind of those traditional tropes kind of get in the way of women being in entrepreneurial roles and what you've kind of pursued?
This is a very interesting question. So yeah, like I do think like some this is not personal experience, but some people do make themselves small to fit into like some okay, this is kind of based on my experience. A lot of men are intimidated by women that make more money than them and are more educated than them. And I'm noticing that a lot in Addis. And even the guys that say they're good with it and they're cool with it, eventually something happens and it doesn't. Like the dynamic somehow doesn't work, right?
They say the same thing in the States, by the way. That's not even just an Ethiopian problem. I've heard that many times in the States that women, like a lot of men get insecure when a woman makes more. Right?
Yeah, like I think more in the black community than in general in the U.S. I think in the U.S., like I didn't experience it that much. Like people never made me feel bad for being more educated or anything. And people still don't make me feel bad about my education. Like it's not like I can take back my degrees. It's too late now. But here it's like it is like a cultural thing. Like there is that more traditional side where if the woman makes more money, and also people care what other people care.
Right. Like so the man, it's not even that he cares; it's just that he feels emasculated.
Yeah, like he could go and hang out with his boys, and his boys make him feel a certain way.
Right.
Oh, of course, like your wife makes this money. Like so it's a different cultural norm. But I do notice a lot of people, women, trying to fit into that. Like I think people, predominant in Ethiopia, not as much in the States. Like in the States, women are, if it happens, it happens. This is not the only role that defines me. Here, I think a lot of the women place a high value on getting married and having kids. So, of course, because of that, they're going to tailor their life to fit that way. For me, and a lot of diaspora women that I've known is, we don't, like for me, being a mother or being a wife is just one element of who I am, right? Or who I would be. There's so many other sides to me. Like I'm a businesswoman, I'm a leader, I'm a daughter, I'm so many other things.
And you don't feel the need to sacrifice anyone to attain the other, right? So they're not mutually exclusive. Gotcha.
And I do think more, like I think about like getting married, having kids, being in a relationship as a bonus. It's not something that replaces everything having my life. And I do notice a lot of times relationships have issues because people think this person comes and they complete your life. No, it's not like that. Your life is already complete. Otherwise,
the relationship is always going to be. Always, I agree with you. And the other thing about one person depending on the other is that if one person wants to leave, right, because the marriage isn't going on, they literally can't without sacrificing their economic stability. What kind of power dynamic? How can you have a healthy relationship unless? I think that's one of the reasons both sides aren't.
But I don't necessarily consider myself feminist, but I do. I mean, although a lot of my employees would disagree, because I do believe in women empowerment, and I'm always pushing for that, and I do think a woman can do whatever a guy can do, right? But I also have my traditional notions. There are certain things that I see in the household that I might feel like, I don't necessarily think this is a guy or a girl thing, but in my own personal experience, it's like I'm probably better at certain things that some people might categorize a female thing, right? So I don't know. Like I also think like people have to think about relationships are not what they used to be. Like we live in a completely different world and time now, right? Women are more and more educated. They are self-sufficient, and so they have to figure out how a relationship is going to work in this current situation, in your current situation, and not the way things used to be. Like I can't be in a relationship and live the way my mom and dad lived together.
It's not possible.
It's not possible.
I mean, we're 2 generations removed. I mean, our parents. They were very different in gender roles from them because we're 2 generations. A lot of our grandparents had arranged marriages. Straight up arranged marriages with people they didn't even know. Right?
And whether we like it or not, like being more educated, being more independent is going to change the dynamics of your relationship. Like, we have to accept that fact, right? Like, it's just going to be different. Like, I knew, like, when my parents were married, and not necessarily my own parents, but other people that were really unhappy in horrible situations, and people just stayed in relationships because they didn't have options, you know? And then now we have options. But I do think sometimes, though, the downside these days is we don't have patience to work through situations because we have options. You know, we're not dependent on someone. So, and relationship sometimes does require you to be patient, to work through the rough times to get to good times. And sometimes, like, I noticed that with me, like, where I'm just like, I don't need this. I have too much going on, and I can move past. I could be flighty sometimes. So I have to check myself and say, okay, I care about this person. I need to get through these bumps, and I need to humble myself. And even though I have options out there, and I'm not dependent on this person. So I do think we have to find our balance.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, do you think, because this was the logic also when Obama came into power in America, that, like, part of the idea was, well, you know, there's a black figure symbolic at the top, and that you started to see, not in as great a number as a lot of people hoped or expected, but more and more young black males and females, but young black males in kind of being elevated because people were like, oh, hey, you know, we see Obama, we see suddenly these black. Do you think this is happening here? Because there has been, and we steer away from politics on this, anything but politics, but there has been in recent years in the Ethiopian state a conscious effort to, you know, elevate women to positions of power, not just within the state, but within the society.
I see that, definitely. But, you know, this is a very funny point that you bring. Recently had a managers meeting, and I said, oh, you know, March is coming, and I'm planning this big women's conference, and I said, and at our company, we're going to do where men are going to do nice things for women, we're going to have all these things, and the men were like, women are doing really well now, like, it's a really good time for women, like, it's almost like, you guys have no room.
Right. Well, see, this is the same thing that white people used to say about black people when Obama was like, hey, no more excuses, there's a black president. And it's like, well, it's all relative, right?
So, and so I was just like, no, like, you can't look at, like, also, again, the 1%, right? Like, there's the people that grew up a certain way. We still have a long way to go with the women that are, like, in the part of the informal economy selling gullit, menamen. We still have a long ways to go. Right. It's not done. And so the men were, and then I have this other friend, and he's like, "You guys are doing great. Like, I don't know what."
Yeah, well, don't complain. Kind of thing. Yeah.
Not don't complain, but it's like I don't know if we need to celebrate it or anything. Sure. But no, it's still you know, Addis is just a little tiny patch of this country we live in. If you go a little outside of Addis, really, is gender equality a big thing? Like, like, we still have a lot of work to do.
It's funny because it's in these, like, it's very uneven, I think.
Yeah.
When people look at gender roles in Ethiopia compared to the West, it's like, well, in some ways, I mean, women have never, and this is more than symbolic, right? Never had to take on their husband's names.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we don't do that here, which is important because Mrs., for people who don't know, it means Miss, the reason it's MRS is Misters, right? And that name is, you are the property of the men, right? Yeah. That's built into the Western patriarchals. We don't really have that here. Yeah. Women traditionally, even in feudal times, there were women who not only were in the power structure and in decision-making roles, but women who owned land, women who, and yet, in other ways, you know what I mean? In other ways, our gender relations are completely backwards.
For sure. Yeah. Like, I mean, also, like you mentioned, there's a lot of people, like, getting high positions, and there are a lot of women leadership positions now. You see that visibly in Ethiopia and in Addis, right? And that's great. That's awesome. But, like, for example, I'm a woman and I'm in leadership. But sometimes the way people talk to me, I know they would never talk to me that way. Right. Like, I go to a bank, like, when I'm wearing a skirt, the way people look at me, like, sometimes I have to play the politics, so I'm like, I get more things done when I'm, like, very feminine, so I dress like that, as opposed to in America, like, I could wear sweats, and I still can command respect, you know, here, like, oftentimes, like, people, when they see me, I'm small, like, I'm a woman, and they'll feel a certain kind of way. And then, but now, over time, like, when they hear me talk, like, and they see the depth I have, then they're respectful. But initially, like, even...
Yeah, people make these snap judgments, these profiling.
Decisions. And so, you know, it's nice that we have these leadership positions, but men still, like, talk to women a certain way. The way you're treated, like, you have to work twice as hard to command respect. Like, like, I'm a very smiley person. Sometimes I have to be very, like, I can't smile because I don't want people to talk to me a certain way, or I don't want to be dominated by someone. So, like, you unconsciously start thinking.
Do you feel that people also, because you said you have to work twice, do you feel that, because I've even noticed this myself as a man, because I'm used to working at work, and I hate sitting around doing nothing. It drives me crazy, right? Do you feel that sometimes women are if not rewarded, like, they're disincentivized for working hard, like you're expected to kind of know your place, kind of thing, or like that if you do work hard, if you show up the guy ahead of you, you kind of are running a risk there too?
No, for sure. Like, I hear comments like, oh, it's but would you ever say that to a guy? Like, you would never say that to, like,
maybe shave your beard. I would get at work, shave your beard. Keep a little, but that's pretty much it.
But nobody also would talk to their boss that way.
Right. Oh, do people talk to you as a boss saying?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And so, like, or like certain situations, whatever. Would they ever talk to a guy that way? No, they would never. Like, go get a hair. Like, they would never talk to that person.
And the other thing that I find, and this is one area where with Me Too, because I dealt with racism where it was really significant in my life, being black in America, was at the workplace. Everywhere else I didn't care. I was just like, well, oh, you're going to call me the N-word? Well, I'm going to go somewhere else now. Thank you for letting me know. Now, or people would, or like people would fetishize you and kind of do like the liberal white person thing of like, very condescending. Like, and I'm like, okay, I know how to manipulate that actually to my advantage, and then I would just ignore that person if they made me uncomfortable. But at work, you're my boss. Like, I can't go away from it. The one thing with the Me Too movement that people ignore, I think, is like sometimes when it's really disturbing, and we talked about this in the domestic situation, right? Like if one person's dependent on the other, they can't leave. If a woman is being treated a certain way by her boss or in the workplace, now you have the economic aspect. Like, I say this because almost every young woman I'm close with, every young woman I'm friendly with, whether they were in the States or they grew up here, has one or two horror stories, right? If they're young, especially if they're considered attractive, horror stories about the workplace, about jobs they had to leave or opportunities they had to give up, or comments that were made about them. You think this is like consistently a problem, and like we should be talking about this more? Or?
I do think we should talk about it more. I mean, for me, I know how to handle it, but it is sometimes demeaning and deflating when you work so hard and your worth is, devalued because you're just a woman. For example, like, I'm in this leadership position. My bosses, the owners, are not in town, and I'm busting my butt 24 hours. And when people disrespect you like that, it's kind of hurtful, right? And it makes you lose your steam. Like, I mean, if I was going to take things personally all the time, like, I would just be... And as a diaspora, like, people are going to not only get burnt out and lose steam, but, like, they're going to be like, why am I dealing with this? I'm going to go back, or, like, little things that, like, for example, I love to take walks after work. I can't do that here. I get catcalled, like, maybe... You
can't take walks in Addis Ababa?
I can't.
Yeah, because you deal with comments.
Yeah, comments. Okay, and I do think for some reason people know I'm diaspora first. I don't know why. But, like, there's always things. Like, I don't... Like, your walk is in the States. Like, you have a long day of work. You can take a walk. Like, nobody's going to bother you. Like, you put your earphones, whatever. Here, I don't like feeling like, oh, like...
Ogle.
Yeah. And, like, you want to feel free when you're walking. That's, like, part of... The beauty of walking is, like, the freedom, right? You don't also, like, you can't just take a road trip, like, drive over just to clear your mind here. So there's not, like, sometimes there aren't a lot of coping things that you could do here. Like, the things that I used to use as tools to cope from the stress of work, like, I don't have it here. Like, I love going and reading in a cafe here. If you do that, people stare at you. because there isn't that reading culture.
Right.
Like, it's like, they look at you like, is someone
What are
coming
you
to
doing?
meet
Yeah,
her? Kind of. But then I meet with a friend, and that's not how I relax or detox, because I've been talking to people all day. I have a lot of employees. So after work, the last thing I want to do is
talk to
someone. Maybe I just need my peace and quiet and my book. So there's a lot of things that are frustrating, but sometimes it makes me sad that people do think that, oh, women are doing well here. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. No, there's still a lot of work to be done. Like, I mean, exactly like you said it. Black people are in a better position than they were years ago, but that doesn't mean it's still great.
I mean, it's all relative, right? And it's insulting. It's almost like you just be happy with what we've given you. It's funny though, because I have a friend, a young woman who actually lived is the other person I know who spent some time in Portland, who came
she
here.
lived in Portland?
Yeah, this is some years ago. But she came here. I knew her in college. She came here and she was trying to work here, trying to do something. But she's like, I only want to come back to Ethiopia if I own my own company.
Yeah.
Because when she would get comments from her bosses and so on, so like really demeaning stuff, when she would complain, people would use the diaspora thing. They'd be like, and she's not even really diaspora. She's like you. She grew up here.
Yeah.
And, she's not like me, right? I was born there. But people would be like, oh, you're just being an American about this.
Yeah.
Like, this is just you. Yeah. But when you complain about these kind of comments, which is, it's even insulting to Ethiopia. Like, our culture is to be demeaning to women at work.
Yeah, what's worse, they're like, I'm just like, just because I think differently doesn't mean like I'm net. And I grew up here predominantly, a big chunk of my life, so it is, but you can't let these things get to you. Because I also always say I keep my eyes on the prize and like really focus on why did I move here. It's not to get validation from men. Sure. It's to get to do good work and to make an impact. And so, oftentimes I haven't had vacation in a while, but it's like last year when I took a vacation, it's nice to step away and see the things you've done. When you're in the mix and just going, you don't feel like you're making much of an impact and you're doing as much, right? And I'm so busy that I haven't had time to like sit down and just soak in the successes. I focus on the things that are not working. Right. Yeah.
Well, that's how you keep yourself motivated.
Yeah.
Well, we do hope that you make time to enjoy your success and to appreciate how much you have to offer to so many people, and not just women in this town. And we really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Come back anytime.
Nice.
Really,
I can come again?
Absolutely. It's an open door policy, is what we say here. We want it to be informal and communal. Yeah. Again, because education at its best, I think, and all the research shows, is when you have a communal, happy, kind of informal open door, and everybody's kind of like gravitating to their interests and sharing that with people. So that's hopefully what we're going to try and create on here as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot.
And maybe I'll come with a friend or so.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll have our mutual friend who introduced us.
Oh yeah.
Is hopefully going to come on in the coming years as well.
And he will have some interesting perspectives
on a number of things.
On a plethora of things. Thank you guys.
All right, thanks a lot. You've been listening to Ras Temari Radio.